Welcome to the Profitable Farmer podcast, where we share stories and tips to help you run a better farming business and create your very own freedom farm. If you're looking to work smarter and not harder in your farm business, welcome. You're in the right place. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to Profitable Farmer. I always just get so excited in the lead up to these conversations. One of the things that I love about this podcast is the opportunity to interview old friends and also to share some stories and to glean some insights from people who many of you may not know, that sort of fly under the radar, often very humble folk who are quite incredible in their own way. So I'm delighted to introduce you in this podcast to Steven Mirtschin, who I first met back in 2009. He then came on board as a client with me in 2010. So 13 years ago, Steven was a business coaching client of mine. And I think back then had 3 businesses. Over the last 13 years, just speaking with Steven before this conversation, he shared with me that over that time, he's opened and built and bought and sold over 22 companies. He's bought 10, he's opened 11, he's created 1 merge or 1 partnership. And as a young entrepreneur and highly successful business person, I just think, like so many of the other conversations I'm lucky enough to have on this podcast, there's just so many lessons and insights. So sit back and enjoy this as Steven and I shoot the breeze and have a bit of a reflection on his entrepreneurial journey in and out of agriculture over the last 20 plus years. Steven, welcome. Great to have you as part of Profitable Farmer.
Thanks, Jeremy. It's great to be here.
How are you, mates? And we haven't connected necessarily too much recently, but we used to. How are you and how's the family?
The family's good. So my wife's actually just been away for 4.5 weeks with work overseas. So we've had a bit busy family at home while she's been away, and just juggling the normal juggle of life and business and family. So it's good. So.
Perfect, Steven. And a little bit of an intro there as to what we will touch on more, what you have achieved over the last sort of 20 years in your business career. But just before we do, how do you reflect on where you've arrived to when you sit and look at what you've achieved and how bright your future is? How do you reflect on where you're arriving to as a business family?
I think I could summarise that by saying that often you can overachieve in 10 years, and what looks like a daunting, impossible adventure in 1 or 2 years is actually possible over 10. And I think that would be a summary for me and my family, is that we started off with something small and we've been very persistent, and we've just kept trying to be consistent and kept trying to do the best we can to grow the business we have, and do that with other people. So not what I do isn't easy, and lots of people don't choose to do what I do. So
how do you describe what you do, Steven? As I understand it now, you've got over 10 businesses running concurrently and over 150 people that you employ as part of those businesses, as well as a real interest in agriculture. How do you describe what you do? I know you're very humble and quite private around this, but how do you describe where you've arrived to and what you run presently?
So I describe that we predominantly run customer service businesses. So we run a series of hospitality businesses and gym businesses across 3 states in Australia. So that's being Victoria, New South Wales and the ACT. And I guess our job, what we've aimed to create is a business that we focus on our customer service and focus on building teams of people. And by doing that, building that team, we can grow our business both internally and also growing in terms of numbers and locations externally as well. So I guess we've tried to spend sort of 10 years developing a system that works, and now on just continuing to replicate that. So I think that would be sort of a summary of what I do. So,
and if we go back 13 years, where were you back then when I first met you? I think you had 3 businesses at that point. Is that correct?
Yeah, we did. I think we had 2 and just getting the 3rd. And I met you through a St. George business coaching series we were doing at the time, and I literally came and just heard you speak, and then I came on board as a client, and that was actually a really difficult time for me, actually, Jeremy, personally, because I had to be really accountable. So I just remember that every time I spoke with you, I had to be accountable on what I had done and what I was going to do. And I think back to that time, it was actually really hard for me to be accountable. And I think what it taught me was just that resilience to be accountable and also to be consistent in your actions. And I've really taken that with me for the next 10 years, is having a weekly action list, having a daily action list, having some goals you want to achieve in the next year, sort of 6 months in a year, and also some things you want to get rid of and some things you want to do. So I've really used that consistently over the last 10 years.
What were some of your challenges back then that you reflect on? I distinctly reflect on a few conversations and a few specific challenges, but how do you reflect on your business as it was back then?
We had a really small business back then. We were limited by cash flow. We were limited by the amount of money, I guess, we were making as a family personally, and limited by, I guess, at the time, what I thought was my own capacity. So I was very operational, and also had to then start to move into some managerial role. And I really found that transition really tough. And I think that you helped me with some of that, is trying to get the balance right between the doing and the managing and the leading. And I think for me, I think that was a lot of what I learned through that time, is actually trying to transition from mainly an operator to moving slowly towards more of a manager and a leader. Because at that stage, I probably had 25 team members, and that just slowly grew from there. So
that transition from being operator through manager to leader, how big a transition has that been for you? Obviously, it's an ongoing journey, but how much do you see that you've changed since then? Like when you get the mindset of an operator, and we talk about this with our farmers all the time, Steve, the mindset of an operator is very different from the mindset of a manager and then the mindset of a leader. How much growth, and you're an avid learner and you're one of the most open humans I've ever met to new insights and new lessons. How much learning and growth have you had to go through to move from operator to leader?
I think I've had to learn most things again, to be honest, to be able to move from where I was to where I am now. And I think back then, when I think about, I guess, the people on this podcast, is a lot of the time then I fixed everything myself. I created all the rosters and bookkeeping and all those things. I was doing a lot of those things myself, and also being a main face in our business. And I actually had to, if we wanted our business to continue to grow, I actually had to completely change how I went about doing things. And that wasn't everything at once, but I sort of had to slowly tick them off. So I guess now I'd say that I'm an operator probably 5 or 10% of the time, and then I'm a leader and manager 95% of the time. And that's been a slow journey over the last 7 years, and really accelerated in the last 4, I guess, to where we are now. So
just to bookend this a little bit, before you got into buying and running small businesses, you were a bank manager and highly successful as in the finance sector. And now, in addition to what you do, you're a succession facilitator with Isabel Knight and Proactive. Would you mind speaking to what inspired the change away from finance and into entrepreneurship?
I think I was lucky. I think one of the things that really promoted change was, I guess, I grew up in a family ag business where I was the oldest of 5 kids. And I think my dad and family had always run an ag business. and so I'd observed them running their ag business. However, when I finished uni, I went to work for a guy, I'd say a guy or a company, Tim, and he used to import commodities into Australia. And I guess he had a real entrepreneurial streak about him, and really he was great at creating concepts and pictures, and then from that going, this is what we're going to do. So I spent my first job was actually working with him, helping him develop a few markets in a few new commodities and lines that he wanted to do. And I found that really creative, of actually going from here's this idea and concept to here we have a business. And I think that triggered me a few years later on, when I was working with ANZ, observing other people in business, to go, I actually think I can do this too. And I think for me, the litmus or the trigger of that event happening, going from what I was doing to actually being a business owner, was we moved locations, we moved states completely. So I was in Queensland and we moved to the ACT. So I had to recreate my life. I had to choose whether I was going to continue doing what I was doing, which was in banking, or to completely change. And I guess I decided to completely change. I felt I'd learnt 90 to 95% of what I could in that profession. And if I was going to change, we didn't have any children. We didn't have a lot of commitments. And then the time was right to change. And I thought that if I failed, I could always go back to what I was doing. And if I was successful, I'd just keep going. So, yeah.
How do you reflect on that single decision? Because, maybe the easy path might have been just to stay in finance and keep doing that. How do you reflect on that choice and what's transpired since?
Well, I think that if you would have asked me 4 or 5 years later, I actually would have thought that I possibly would have made more money doing what I was doing on a straight sort of income or expenses to my family. However, I think that if I looked broader, and also what we have been able to achieve, making the change was an absolute game changer for our family, both my own little family and then also my extended family. And I guess the big change for me was giving time. Is, I guess, if you're fully employed, you don't really have the time to do or think in the ways you need to think as an entrepreneur when you're going to buy or build or sell a business. So I think what it gave me was time. So. And
just for everyone's benefit, would you mind just sharing your connection to agriculture and your family background? I think on the Darling Downs?
Yeah. So I guess my dad ran a cropping and beef enterprise west of Toowoomba. So he had a property about half an hour west of Toowoomba, and he had another one about 2 hours west of Toowoomba. And I guess I grew up with my mum and dad very much working with them in their ag business. And then I left and went to uni and did a Bachelor of Ag Science in Brisbane. And I guess at the end of that, and when I started work, I worked out there wasn't enough opportunity for me to come home and return to the family farm. And my brother was also there on the family farm, and he was a great operator. So I guess in my early 20s, I decided I needed to take a different course of action and create my own adventure. And that's what I did for a number of years. So, yeah, I guess that's my link. And I love agriculture. I love the challenge of it. I love the challenge of the decision making in both good and bad times. And I love the ability that you can, I guess, operate a business and also have an impact on capital. So a bit like you can change the value of your land by what you do. I think it's a remarkable business. So I guess that's my tie to it.
And looping back, you now lead and facilitate succession with Proactive for farming families. What inspired you to get into that, given the entrepreneurial trajectory that you've been on?
Well, I think one of the things that inspired me was, after being in my own business for 6 or 7 years, is that I found for myself it a bit insular, because you're a bit focused on yourself. And I guess what I really valued when I was working as a bank manager, the ability to help and support other people, either grow their business or change their business. And I guess proactive for me, it just happened. I guess I'd been thinking for a while, how do I find a role like this where I could help farmers and it could fit into what I do? And for a while, I didn't think that existed. And I guess proactive found me, if I'm perfectly honest. And so for me, the thing I value about what I do now is the ability to help people have difficult conversations, to speak about their family, which I value a lot, and to speak about their business, and to create a plan for the future, and to be candid in my own family and most other families. None of those conversations are easy. There's different things that make those conversations very difficult. So yeah, I think I get a lot of value out of seeing families create a plan and then action them. And I think that's the thing that families get real value from, is when they get in and they action some of their actions and they actually see real change. And I think that's where I get real benefit, that I actually see them change. So,
what's been the highlight, Stephen, of your time in that role with Proactive and supporting sort of many families across Australia? What's been the real highlight for you?
I think there's many highlights. I think one of the highlights is that I get to work with high capacity people that run great businesses, and I get to just spend a small amount of time with them in their business. And I think for me, I also learn from them as well, and I can use those learnings and take them into another business scene that I'm in, both in my own little world and also with other families as well. So I think for me to learn from great business people is something that I get a lot of value out of personally, and also the ability to use that information and experience to share that with other people as well. So
it doesn't surprise me that Isabel and that team reached out to you to ask you to step into that facilitation space. And I've got no doubt, given the commercial mind that you've got and that passion to help people, that you play a really significant role with those families that you work with, Stephen. Just coming back to your entrepreneurial journey, how do you grow from 3 businesses to 22, or that involvement, and a team of 10 to 150? Would you mind just sort of joining those dots for us, and let's explore some of the growth steps, some of the key decisions, some of the lessons, and some of the challenges that you've had on that journey?
Well, I think one of the first places I start with many things I do, which might sound a bit weird, is actually draw a picture. So, and I learned that from a book I read called The Winner's Bible, is most people, when they're thinking about something just in their head, is they only see certain parts of it. And I guess for me, what I like to do is actually draw pictures and stick them to my walls and use that to actually describe what I'm going to do next. And so I think when I think back to the early 2010s, is that I did that a lot to help grow my business. So I'd actually draw pictures. I'd say, well, this is where I am now. This is what I want to do next. And then I'd add all the detail underneath that picture. Is what are we doing with this business? Are we buying it? Do we want to buy another one of these? Do we want to sell one of the things we have? Because we were very much limited by capital. And so we had to be quite strategic in how we allocated our capital. So all the time I'd use pictures, and then I'd start with a concept like that, and then I'd get in the detail first. I think lots of people get in the detail first, create the spreadsheet with all the numbers, and they don't think about the concept. What is the thing you're actually trying to achieve? And I think that's really important, is you've got to start with your concept, is what is it that you're actually trying to achieve? And then secondly, what do the numbers look like? And what do the people look like secondary? And I think that's the thing that we had to learn, is that we can find the people to do what we want to do. We can get the numbers to work in the business to make them work. But if we don't have the right strategy, it's not going to work. And I think for me, when I've been scaling the whole way, it's about trying to do that, is to create a picture, and then underneath that, then layer that with the numbers and then the people.
What did the picture look like? Just give us a sense of practically and actually what you drew there. Was it a vision of the future that you were building towards, or was it something different from that?
I think early on early on, I think my picture was quite small. It's certainly not at what it is today, but really is how do we get to in this place in 3 years' time or 2 years' time? It wasn't. I think you've got a big goal. I think you talk about those big goals in 20 years. I think for me, it was actually about, I had one of them, but how do we deal with this next 2 or 3 to actually help us march forwards a little bit? And I think that's how I thought about that. And I think the thing that happened for us is when you start scaling a bit, there's things go wrong. And so what I had to learn is how do we start managing this thing when there's more things going on and more things going wrong. And I think for us, as we scaled, we learnt that we had to be more consistent with our, I guess in our world, our daily operations, and how consistent we were being with what we wanted people to do in our daily operations checklists, and being consistent on how people are doing what we need them to do and how we're training them. And I think for us, we had to do a lot of learning in that space. Is how do we create consistency? How do we get the operations happening in the way we want them to be? And how do we train people like that to actually get them to where we want to be?
So we do talk about that a lot with our members, Stephen, that we need a really big, hairy, audacious, long-term goal. We need to break that back to 10 years and then get really clear on where we need to be and what the business model needs to look like 3 years from now in order to have a shot at achieving the 10-year goal and then the BHAG. It sounds to me like that picture that you were creating was a really detailed description of what it was that you were shooting for in the medium term with that longer term vision in view. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, it is. It is. I think in our business, where we've started and where we've finished is actually different. Like we actually, so I guess we operate predominantly franchise businesses. However, the franchises we've started with are not the franchises we're operating now. So I think that when I started, we had the goal in mind. We weren't always using the right tools to get to the goal. So I guess we had to do some of that, is decide we've got the right system. We're not necessarily using the right tools. So we actually had to spend some time changing the tools and recreating. And I think that's very similar to agriculture as well. Is sometimes you've got the right system, you don't always have the right livestock, or you don't always have the right crop. And I think that to me has a similarity to business, is that you can have 7 or 8, you can have 9 out of 10 things going well, but if you don't have one of the 10 things going well, it doesn't always end up going well. And I think that's been one of my lessons as well, is that don't give up, even if you've still got time. You've always got time in front of you to change and to recreate. And I think we've had to do that a few times, and that's the natural course of business. Because nothing's going to be the same.
That was my next question. How many times have you had to reinvent the business model that you were moving forward with in order to sort of stand the test of time and keep growing and keep performing? I distinctly remember that the 3 businesses that you had in 2013 aren't the types of businesses that you've arrived into now. How many times have you had to adapt, innovate, reinvent your approach and your business model over the years?
I think probably, when I think about it, probably about 4 times. And I think the key things have stayed the same, is that we have businesses that we're focused on customers and customer service, and also businesses that involve team members and building great teams. So I think that hasn't changed. However, the banner out the front or the product we're selling has changed. And I think that we've had to do that. And if we didn't do it, we probably wouldn't be where we are today. And I think that for us, we've had to learn what we're good at. So, and irrespective of the brand or the product that we're dealing with, what are the things that we're good at? And I think we're good at building teams, and we're good at customer service and working with customers. And I think that's how we've chosen to grow our business. And I think the other thing is, for us, when we grow a business, we like to understand it. So for me, I'm a practical person at heart. And if I can't practically do something or understand it, I'm not going to choose to do it. So if I can't practically do the things that we're asked to do in that business, I'm actually going to choose not to do it. Because if I don't understand that, I don't think that I can actually train or empower or get my team to do that as well. So we like to keep our business pretty simple in that way. Lots of people try and do lots of complex things. I think we're trying to do really simple things and do them well. So,
and linking that back to agriculture, for me, I think giving ourselves time to be very strategic and ask those really intricate questions about our business or farming systems and our business models, and being bold enough to crunch the numbers and then adapt. The business model we start with is rarely the business model that we finish with. I like that metaphor that I think John Deere started out as a blacksmith, Tiffany's started out as a stationery company, and Colgate started out as a soap business. And if they had stayed as those businesses, they wouldn't be relevant as major brands today. So it's worthwhile our farmers just taking a moment to think. And I think, what about now, Stephen, with inflation and increasing interest rates and softening commodity prices, and for quite a few people, they're coming into a tighter season than we've had perhaps. How important is it that we have time and space to really ask those questions around the business model that we're a way to move forward with?
I think it's critical. Like, I think for us, we're going through that at the moment. Is we've just sold a business in the last month, literally, and one of those decisions to sell was looking at it probably late last year, going, is this a business that we want to continue into the next 2 or 3 years? Is it going to provide what we need to provide? Is it going to do what we need to do? And I guess our choice was it wasn't. So in late last year, we started that process of selling. We thought we had it sold. Came to February, that contract fell over, and we actually thought we're actually in the position we didn't want to be in, which was trying to sell this business in 2023. But we went back to market and did it again. So I think for us, we just have to do that every day, every month, every day and every month. Is the thing we've got now going to deliver what we needed to deliver this month, this quarter, this year, and the next 5 years? And I think for us, everything is actually for sale. And I think that's a bit different in agriculture, is that if you've got a family farm that you've had for 5 generations, that piece of land's not for sale. However, I think sometimes you've still got to have that critical thinking, is what do we need to choose to do to make this work so we can stay here for another couple of generations? And I guess that's the way I like to think about it, is what do I need to do now to make sure I have this business in 5 years' time and it's bigger than what we have now? Because I need to be bold enough to make those decisions. If something needs to go, it actually needs to go.
Coming from a leadership perspective, have there ever been moments where you've felt like you're procrastinating around some of those decisions? And what do you do so that you can be decisive when there is a key decision like that to be made?
A very good question, Jeremy.
Or are you not an indecisive person? I think a lot of our members, because of the role that they carry with that family asset, if you like, and the fact that maybe the land isn't in their minds for sale, and so they've got to work out how to adapt the business model. I can imagine that quite a few of our listeners struggle with procrastination around some of those key decisions. Has that ever been an issue for you, or do you not find that you are indecisive by nature?
I think everyone is slightly indecisive. I'm still a little bit indecisive. I think how we think about what we're going to do next is we try and do it in a small way. Is we don't stop what we're doing and then start the next thing. is I think how we like to do it is we want to dip our toe in the water now and have a go at a new business and go, can we get this thing to work? Does it work? And can we replicate it? And that's how we like to do it. So I think the same for a agribusiness. Is it how do you allocate 5% of your turnover to this next thing you want to do and allocate a tiny little piece of capital to say, let's give that a go. Does that work? And if it does work, let's do a bit more of it. And I think that's actually, I have a couple of business partners in my group. Like I work with other people. And I think that's how we like to do things, is we actually like to allocate a little bit of time, a little bit of energy, and a little bit of capital to say, is this going to work and does it work? And then go from there. Because I think one of the worst things is to stop what you're doing now and start the next thing, presuming it's going to be better, when actually it's not better, it's the same or worse. And I think that's a real challenge in business, is actually to look over the fence and presume the next thing's better. It could be, but it may not be. And I think that's the way we like to think about how we're going to do the next thing next.
It's a clever way to de-risk the decision, is to make it a staged and an organic transition, perhaps.
And I think that I remember you took me actually to a something in Melbourne where Brad Sugars spoke. He was an international business coach, and something I took away from that, I've never forgotten. He talked about that you never sell your business until you know what you're going to do next. And I guess that thinking is the same about how we think about our business. Is we're not going to sell all of our businesses in one go to suddenly go to a shiny new thing. We're actually going to make sure the shiny new thing is shiny, and then try and allocate more capital that way. And I think about the same in agriculture, is that something might look really shiny, but don't stop completely what you're doing now. Just dip your toe in the water. Does it work? Then do a little bit more of it.
I think so often humans can be wired for drama and trauma. And often when we think that we need to make a change because what we're doing is not working, we aim for the 180-degree change, whereas normally it's a 3 to 5% correction rather than a complete sort of about face, isn't it?
Completely.
So one of the things that really impresses me about you, Steve, is the way in which the culture you are able to create, irrespective of which franchise system you choose to invest in. What you do differently with your teams to drive culture and drive results, I think is quite unique. When you arrive, I think for our listeners, a lot of them are struggling with the concept of building out an on-farm team. And maybe we are in that mindset often of being the on-farm operator, and the notion of building out systems and structures and then recruiting on farm to build out a team so that our farms can work for us more effectively is something that a lot of people struggle with. When you arrive into a new business, and let's say it's an underperforming team, what are some of the things that have really worked for you to take that team from where it is to transition into a new culture to become more high performing, and then to build out a stable team to support each of your businesses?
I guess probably an example I can give is we bought 2 businesses in May last year, and we took over an existing team, and they weren't a big team. It was probably only 5 or 6 of them. And I guess the first thing we do is we set the expectations. The first thing we do is talk about what we're aiming for as a business, what we expect of that business, both in terms of culture and operations. And then I guess we begin by presuming they're actually going to do that. So I guess that's where we start. We actually presume and give people the benefit of the doubt that they can do this. And I think that when we bought those 2 businesses, that's where we started. I guess the reality was in 3 months' time, we actually had new leaders in that completely new team in that business in 3 months' time. Because what had happened was both the team members working there knew that we weren't going to change our standard, and we actually expected a certain level of expectation from them, which wasn't unreasonable. It was just reasonable. And we weren't going to change that expectation. we're going to continue to talk about the same things. And I guess when we're changing a team, what we're looking for is people with talent, not people with skills, people with talent. And I guess that's something I talked to my dad about. He goes, well, these guys can't do these things in ag. And I think that is it is a real challenge, is how do we find skilled people? I guess in our business, we're not looking for skilled people. We're just looking for people who want to give things a go, have the right talent. So what I mean by that is that they actually just want to give it a go and they've got a real reason for giving it a go. And we're actually going to teach them and train them the rest. And I guess we find that if we find the right talent, we get the right result. And does things happen perfectly? No, to begin with. But do we get there, and do we have an overperforming business? The answer is yes.
So that adage, hire on attitude, train on skill, is that what you're getting at there? The talent is about their mindset, their attitude, their desire to do their best, and then you can train them on the skill. Is that what you're suggesting?
Completely.
So to what degree do you think that's relevant in agriculture? I think this is really interesting, because often when we recruit that farmhand or that junior farm manager or that operations manager, we look for someone with 10 or 12 or 15 years of on-farm experience. Across our membership, we see people grabbing tradesmen out of town, and we've got a landscape gardener working as our key person on our farm. Hire on attitude, train on skill. Do you think that's equally relevant in agriculture, or do you think it's different?
I think it's equally relevant. I think the skills you have, I think in skills to work in agriculture, you need to have broad skills. But I think the biggest thing you need is the right attitude. Because actually, if you want someone to be there for a year, 2 years, 3 years, if they've got the right attitude, they're going to be there. If they've never got the right attitude, they're actually going to pick up a job and go to work somewhere else for more money. And I guess we've got the same challenges in our industries we work with. They are not the highest paying industries. Is people need to choose to work with us, and we want them to choose. But if they want to find more money, they're going to find it somewhere else. And that's just the reality of the industry we work in. And I guess what we find, if we employ people based on their talent and their desire, and we train and equip them, and we empower them, and we try and make a real difference in their life, that they're actually going to stay longer. And that's what we care about, is actually building long-term relationships with people that are going in the same direction we are. So, and I'd say that in most cases now, that especially into our fitness business, the people we employ actually haven't got previous experience. And if they have, we're less likely to interview them. Just fact. So
for me, that opens up a whole new thought process, hopefully, for our listeners. Often in farming, we think that it's really hard to find good people. They're just not out here. They're not in our town. They're not in our region. If we open our mind to, finding someone with great talent, good mindset, good attitude, and we open our mind to recruiting from out of town or out of metro cities or even overseas, is there actually a shortage of potential employees for farm families?
I think people have to be open to trying to give things a go in a new way. And I guess over our experience in business, we've had to do that too. In our talent pool, is that I think we started our business looking for people who had skills, and we've just continually evolved that over time to where we are now. And I guess in our food business, we employ lots of people that weren't born in Australia. Is that they've made it to Australia, they're studying, they want to change their future, and they want to make their way. And I guess what I've learned is that there are some amazing people wanting to start an amazing adventure in Australia, and all they need is some support and care. And I guess that's what we try and do in our food business, is that we we actually try and understand what's happening in someone else's world, and we encourage them in their world, because they're not going to work with us forever. And by doing that, we create wonderful loyalty. And I guess I'd say to anyone who's thinking about recruiting people is that sometimes you can find some wonderful staff members from new places you've never considered before. And to be honest, we've had lots of failures too. Don't get me wrong, we have lots of failures. However, the blessing of finding some great ones from a different pond that you haven't gone fishing in before, from our experience, is wonderful.
Just to that point, Steven, how well structured is your recruitment process, and how creative and far-reaching is your search campaign for talent? I think so many small businesses I've worked with and so many farmers, they don't have a recruitment system, and the strength of how they search is not there. So, we're big on this. If you want to find talent, we get the results we deserve. And if you've got a really thoughtful recruitment process and a really creative search front end to that you're going to give yourself the best chance of finding that talent from those far ponds, far afield. What does yours look like, and how creative is your search at the front end?
Well, I think that we try and be creative in how we write things. Because if you're solely talking about what you're doing and what you're responsible for, that's probably the same as most other job ads. I think you need to encompass in, especially for young people, is what they're going to learn, what environment are they going to be in, who are they going to be hanging out with, and what are the other things that are beyond just the actions. Is what are the things you're going to feel, what are the things you're going to value, or what are the things you're going to learn, and what are the things you can do next. And I think if you're write something compelling like that, you've got more chance than most of getting more applicants. And I think the other thing is that things are now visual. Is if you can add a QR code or something to your job ad that can get people to photos or something of your farm or experience, smiling faces, it's a big step forwards. Because young people now, most of their world is visual, video, photos. Is just having a job ad that's written actually isn't that compelling. Is what they want to see is actually some photos, some fences, some cattle, some horticulture. Like, that's so compelling.
And we've seen some really compelling farm videos that tell the farm story and create that on-farm opportunity through video, which is another really key asset. And then that video can land in so many lateral and perhaps unlikely locations, so that you do sort of deepen and strengthen your search effort. So coming back, you say you set expectations with those teams as one of your first things. How important is it to have a clear set of values, a clear set of standards, and a clear set of expectations when you arrive to a team? And what would you say to a farm team that hasn't committed some of those things to writing or put them on paper?
I think where I'd start is, if you've got a small team and everything is verbal, is that your new team member doesn't know what you already know. Is that if you've got a small team and you've been working in a team of 1, 2, or 3 people, is you've got 20 or 30 years of history of how you've gone to do things and why you've gone to do it. And the new team members just turning up with none of that background is what you're asking of them is suddenly to try and learn what you've learned in 20 years. And I think what the values or what the dot points you write down is actually to help you stop, rather than the next action you've got to go either to the fence or the cattle yards or the water trough, is actually to stop and talk about your values and why you do something in a certain way, rather than just expect that they know. Because I think that so many people come from, I guess that's what I've learned from succession planning. It's not my job to judge how another family works, because every family works differently. And because of that, how people enter your workforce is very different, because everyone's family setting they grew up in is very different. What you're asking them to do when you're joining a small family business is actually to bring on some of the views and the perspectives of the way your family sees this ag business. And the only way they're going to do that is actually with time, and you dedicate time and you dedicate a resource to say, well, this is how we see it and this is why we see it. And I think that actually helps you weed out the wheat from the chaff, is when you spend that time and you set the expectations, it's very easy to see within a couple of weeks whether that person's actually the right person for that role or whether they're not. And if they're not, that's probably, and you have those conversations a couple of times, it's not going to change. So.
And when you do that piece, you come in and just clarify expectations and set the standards. It's a little bit like wanting to take a 3-star hotel and say, hey guys, we're now 5 stars. Is it likely that all team members will lift, or is it likely that you might not get everyone to come along for the ride? And is that okay?
I think when we take over a new business, our gut feel is that probably 75% of people won't come along with the journey. And I guess that's what we've learned, is that our job is to not change from the course we're going down. It's we're going to set a standard. We're going to set a set of standards. We're going to live by those standards. And our hope is that people rise and they get to that level. I think for us is having the right team is far more important than the business we've got underneath it. So if we don't feel we've got the right team, we just change it, because we just understand how much impact that has on our business and what it delivers to our bottom line. So have I answered that for you, Jim?
You have, absolutely. What would you say to a farming family that might have a small team that now want to sit down and set down their values, their standards and their expectations, and then communicate that back to their small on-farm team, knowing that maybe 1 or 2 or 3 of the team might not come along for the ride? Would your advice be to do it anyway?
I think it would. It's taken me a long time to answer that, but I think I would. Because I think that I go back to the picture. If you want to create a picture of where you want to be in 2 or 3 years' time, and you're actually compelled by that picture, and that involves doing some things now, is that by not doing them now means you're not going to get to your picture. So I guess for us, we know what that picture needs to be in 3 years' time, and then if it's not going to happen with the team you've got, you've either got to choose: do you not get your picture, or do you at some point change your team? And I think that's hard. Like, we've got team members that work for us that are imperfect, and we're in the process of changing. It doesn't mean that they finish tomorrow, but it means that we've got a journey in a direction we're going towards, and we know the direction we want to go in.
So, Steve, we've talked about the importance of standards and expectations and being really clear on that. And you've also talked about that mindset of hiring talent rather than skill, and being really creative in your search for that talent. In addition, when you arrive to an average team and you want to move that to being high performing and really nurturing a high quality culture, what are a couple of other things that you do?
I think for us, young people need to feel like they're moving forwards. They actually feel like they need to move. They need to feel that they're moving to something. And I guess for us, I guess it's not like it was 30 years ago that someone's going to have a job and be there for 10 or 15 years. They're more likely to have a job, and that's what we find. They have a job for a period of time and then move on. And I guess for us, the thing that we do to try and keep people with us longer is we almost set them up on a mini career path. Is they might start with us as a team member, let's say in our food business, and then we've got a couple of steps we can actually take them along the way. They can be a supervisor, they can manage a shift, then they could be an assistant manager, then they could be a store manager, and then ultimately they could be an area manager looking after a number of stores. And I feel like from our perspective, if people feel like they've got a journey or something they can move along and they can learn along the way, they're actually more likely to stay with you. And I think that if you're getting people that are managers or area managers in our little world, is that what we honestly and candidly do is we give them the opportunity to be involved with our business. And because I guess that we feel that for us, great people deserve to be rewarded, and actually we'll say that let's open and build a business together. And that's been part of our model, is trying to find great people, doing it together and replicating. And for us, giving people the compelling vision that they could actually do this for themselves, they could run their own business with someone else who's already run a business and grow, is really compelling. And I guess we've done that a couple of times, and the results are wonderful for both people. So
thank you for saying that. We talk a lot about that a great way to retain talent is to have a bigger vision for them than perhaps they have for themselves. And for me, that's exactly what we've spoken to. You want a young person come into your business, Steve, and if they're the right sort of person that fits your leadership team, you work with them for a few years and grow them, potentially even to have an interest in a franchise with you for themselves. Having a career path for our employees is just so important. If you don't have a ladder for them to climb, they're going to find another ladder to climb, aren't they? So by giving them that, yeah, I can see why people would stay. You also mentioned in your comments before that you want to make a difference in their lives, that you support and care for your people, and that you engage in their world, I think were terms you use. So how intimate is your leadership team's knowledge of those individuals that you are building up potentially to become business partners with you in time? How well do you know them? How much do you demonstrate you care for them? And what would your comment be around the importance of really getting to know them?
I think the answer of all of that to me is so critical to our business. I feel that if you ultimately care for the people that work for your business and in your business, that they'll ultimately care for you and your business. And I guess for us, some practical things for us, some of our managers now aren't, they weren't born in Australia, they don't have any family here. And for us, we are some of their family. So I guess for us to actually be involved with their lives and share some of their critical things, like they'd announced, like practically in the last 3 weeks, I've had an announcement that one of our team members is having a baby, and they probably announced that within the same couple of days as telling their family. So, and not even telling their friends in Australia. So I guess for us, being involved with people's lives is so important, because I guess when I thought about coming onto this show, this podcast, is that I feel like that's where we get ultimate benefit, is by us understanding their world and helping them, is they also understand a bit about our world. And I think actually combining both of those things together is actually what I get out of business, is actually seeing people as people move forwards. And I guess our motto is that our job is to actually move them further forwards. And if we can move them further forwards and go in a career path in their direction that they want to go in, and we can encourage that, that's great. But if we can teach them how to run their own business and they go and do it by themselves, that's great. But if they go into business with us, that's great as well. Is that we actually want to promote all three options. Is we don't see that people are going to work for us forever. They're probably going to work for us for anywhere from 1 to 4 years. But actually, out of the end of that, we want them to do all of those three things I just talked about. And we want to support them to do it.
How much of your success has been building up and backing and then partnering with your existing team?
Probably a third of our success has been based on that.
Yeah.
And I think that it'll grow from here.
So how often in your journey in agriculture have you seen farming businesses actually do similar with their employed team?
I haven't seen it very common. It has happened. I've seen a couple occasions, but it's not very common.
We've got a few examples within our alumni. And if you're listening, you'll know who you are. I won't mention specific names, but a couple of our stories are well known where they've created the opportunity for their farm manager to take equity in the business that runs the farm, and creating real opportunity for loyal, engaged, high quality senior members of farm teams to get that same opportunity in agriculture. Do you think, Stephen, that there's a greater opportunity for farming families to learn about that from small business land, perhaps, where it's done quite regularly? Often we're giving equity away to key team members as a way of helping them have their own entrepreneurial journey. For me, in accounting firms, law firms, physiotherapy practices, in franchises like yours, it's commonplace. Do you think we can learn a bit as farming families around that and perhaps create similar opportunities for key farm team?
I think there's certainly lots of ways to create business relationships with your employees. And I guess for us, that's critical to grow our business. Is for some people, they might feel like they're giving away a little bit early. I guess we look at it to say, well, what can we do over 10 years? And if we share some of this pie now, what will that pie look like in 10 years' time? And I think that it doesn't mean you've got to give away part of your current pie. It could be that you actually create a new pie and you try and grow that pie. And I think there's lots of ways to be creative in that. Is that for us, it's about creating a new pie and growing that pie bigger, and doing that with great team members. And I think when you think about lots of people who've got their family farm, that they've already had this family farm for a long time, it's not necessarily easy to suddenly share in the operating business, but it might be really easy to create another business off to the side, whether it's through leasing or whether it's through machinery or a new block, that they actually can do that with other people and quality team members. And I think that when people have the opportunity to do that, is that they also lift. Is they might have been at 100% before, they'll be at 120% next, because they actually have been given an opportunity they would have never been able to get to themselves, or it would have taken them 15 years. And I guess for us, that's the leveraging for us, is we get to bring time forwards with some people. They get to do something they wouldn't have been able to do for another 10 years, and they're doing it now. And there's so much empowerment in that. And also that the other thing is that when people enter business with other people, they actually feel more confident. If you're a new entrant, it's actually pretty daunting to start your own business by yourselves. However, when you're entering it with someone who's actually been doing it for 10 years, they're actually far more confident as well in their decisions. They've got someone to talk to, got someone to share that experience with. And from my perspective, I'd really think about how you could make something like that work.
So if I've got a young son or daughter coming through, should it be any different for a family member in the next generation, or could similar commercial, entrepreneurial business partnerships be struck between generations of the same family? Should it be any different?
No, I don't think so, Jeremy. I think that I always think about that you've got to be a good doer. You've got to do the right things. You've got to be the right person to have the right to own the right business. Is that if you've got someone who's daily they're doing the right things, is that if you can actually get them to practice that in a business relationship, even if it's only a little business, is you get to see them do that in a little way. Is the best way for someone to grow their entrepreneurial skills, their business skills, is actually to do it in a little way and be able to learn how to make decisions themselves at a younger age and get some right and get some wrong. Because that's actually the best way for them to learn. And like, I've made countless poor decisions over my time, but the only way I've been able to grow is actually the freedom to make them. And I think that's something that I think that is that the earlier someone can get on that business journey to actually learn how to make their own decisions and what works and what doesn't, it actually sets the future up so much better. because they've actually had 5 or 10 years of practice first before getting operating part of a bigger pie.
So Stephen, really insightful comments around creating a high-performing team. You haven't just created one high-performing team, you've got multiple running across multiple businesses, and you've been through a fairly significant scale-up journey, like 150 plus team members. How do you achieve that over time, and what are some of your reflections around building out multiple high-performing teams and scaling up? And what are your reflections over the last 10 years as you've gone about that?
I think one of my reflections is you've got to be committed to your vision. Is that if you create the vision and you put it up there, you've got to be committed to actioning it. And I think that that's something that we did, is we actually said we wanted to do this, we wanted to grow our business, we wanted to have a number of locations. And I think that there's many things along the way that are signposts to say that you should stop. And I think that we've had no shortage of them in our business to say, well, this is hard. This is 300 Ks away. Oh, this business isn't going well. And I think that beyond all of that, you need to be committed to your goal. And I think for us, that's something I'm good at, is looking at that long term to say, well, where do we want to be in this long term? And then bringing that back to the short term to what do I need to do now, or what do I need to put up with, or what do we need to tolerate in order for that to happen. And I guess for us, that's something I've just had to become used to doing, is if we want to grow our team, it's going to get bigger, is that to begin with, the team members aren't going to be perfect. We've just got to tolerate that. And our job is to sand them and refine them, create them into diamonds. And if they don't work, to find new ones. And I guess irrespective of what's happened on our journey, is that we've always been focused on the next thing we want to do to grow our business. And what we haven't done is allow our circumstances to get in the way of stopping that from happening. Whether that's a cash flow challenge, whether it's a people challenge, a capital challenge, a timing challenge, is that I guess we are committed to rolling out our path and our journey, and we're just going to do it. And I guess for us, for me, that's mindset, is we've just got an unwavering commitment to say, we are doing this on this date and we're just going to make it happen. If we need to find 25 team members on that date to happen, we're just going to do it. And even if 10 of them aren't right, we're going to have to start and then find the right ones next. And I guess for us, that's been a taught thing. That hasn't happened straight away. Is that I would have been very nervous about that 10 years ago. However, where we are now, we have so much more confidence because we've actually done it now so many times. But I think for me, that's my perspective, is that we don't let our circumstances get in the way of what we're to do next. We've already set that vision and we're going to do that.
Don't let your circumstances get in the way of staying true to your vision. What a compelling, for me, that's really timely, I think, for so many in the current climate. So thank you for that. What a great insight. Have you heard of the Stockdale paradox, Stephen?
No, I have not.
We talked about this at our last conference, and humour me for a moment, guys, but Stockdale I think he was a sergeant in the war and survived years in the concentration camp. And he said his key takeaway, that's now quite a key and well-known business principle. Jim Collins talks about this in Good to Great. Have unwavering belief that you will prevail against all odds, but at the same time, have the courage to face the brutal facts of your current reality. And that was it. He survived the concentration camp because he had unwavering faith that he would prevail, but he was also willing to face the brutal facts in the here and now. And you talk about having big picture view, but also being able to focus in the here and now around the small detail and make really important decisions in the here and now. that is sort of coined the Stockdale paradox. And they say that it's a really significant trait of a high-performing leader is that you've got both those abilities. It's a really nice piece, but just came to mind as you were speaking to that you've got to be completely committed, be willing to persist, but also be able to face the brutal facts and deal with the immediate day circumstances. So great comments, Stephen. Thank you.
I think it's great.
No doubt, in a customer service oriented business and in hospitality, that there's probably not much over the years that you and your team haven't seen. I can only imagine just how many customer service, supply, other challenges you've faced. What have been some of the obstacles that you've had to overcome and persist through on that journey?
So I wrote a bit of a list before we came on today, and I think everyone faces challenges. I guess for us, we've had two businesses have cars drive straight through the front of them and then completely smash our business apart. So that's happened twice. We've had people steal from us on multiple times and decent amounts of money. And we've had people steal from our business. We've had things broken on purpose, maliciously. Obviously, we deal with a lot of customer complaints. We had someone car stolen from our business a month ago. I think for us, when you're dealing with people, there's always going to be things go wrong, whether that's from a customer service perspective or even team members within our business. And I guess our perspective now is things are going to go wrong. It's not that they shouldn't; they actually are going to go wrong, and it's actually how do we deal with them when they do go wrong. And I think that's hard to actually get to that mindset. Is often people have the mindset is, oh, why did that go wrong? I think we start that things are going to go wrong, and that's just natural course of events. And our job is actually to go, well, what are we going to do about that next? Is what do we do when it does go wrong, and what are we going to do next? So,
great comment. Thank you. Now, just to round this out, I'm mindful of time and aim to sort of start to wrap this up. Talk to me about pecans. I think you had a sort of idea and you wanted to get back into agriculture. Would you mind just telling me a bit about the pecan story and where that's arriving you to over the last couple of years?
Well, a number of years ago, I felt like I could afford to have a small farm, but not necessarily. I never had an aspiration to have a big farm. So I guess I don't see myself as a broad acre cropper or having a cattle station or any of those things. But what I felt like I had and what I enjoy is being able to create things and start from a small concept and grow that into a big concept. And I guess for me, about 5 years ago when I went through my own family succession, that was something that really stuck to me, is I actually wanted to be involved with agriculture. And so I had this idea that I wanted to create a pecan orchard. And one of the coaches I had at the time said to me that, well, if you want to start. And I had no farm. It takes 3 years to grow them in a nursery. And he just literally said, if you order them and start paying for them, you'll make this happen. And so I guess that's what we agreed I was going to start doing. So I started doing that a couple of years ago out of my cash flow. And out of that journey, I guess I worked out that also how am I going to do this? And along that journey, I met my now business partners that were also on a different journey, and they had a different picture. So they were in a dairy business, and they were going, well, how do we have our own land? How do we have our own future when they were new to ag with no family backing? And I guess Michael and Ash and I and my family, we joined our pictures together. And we said, well, how can we do this together? So we've been a year and a half into a joint venture where we're now running a dairy business. We're about to plant our first trees in a month's time, and we're going to start that journey together. And I guess that's all about partnering and bringing skills and about drawing those pictures together to how do we do this together. And I think there's lots of challenges when you're in business together. There's also lots of joys, and we're looking forward to running this race together for the next 20 years.
So what's your view on partnerships and even farm business partnerships?
I guess my personal view is, and I've got the personality for this, is I'd rather do something together rather than do it by myself. Because I guess I now have learnt that I only have a certain amount of skills, and actually, if you want to grow a big business, you need lots of skills. And I think to have the best skills, you bring people into your business with those skills, and you grow together. So I guess we've had that mindset for more than 10 years now, and that's one of the aspects of growing our business is how do we find great people with great skills we don't have, and creating a picture and doing it together. So very excited about my return to ag.
Really exciting, and well done for doing it as part of a partnership. I think the model with which you've expanded outside of agriculture, Stephen, it's proven. So I've got no doubt that you'll make a go of it inside of agriculture. And great to know that you're leaning back in and not just supporting farming families through succession facilitation, but you're also having a crack again in agriculture. Well done.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Now, I hope we've, in some small way, done your backstory a bit of justice. It's been incredibly insightful to sort of reflect with you on that journey and to share some of the insights that have come from your success over that time. Just for our farmer listeners, what would be your sort of final reflection on moving from 3 businesses to your sort of significant team now of 150 plus people, plus sort of a farming interest? What's your key reflection or your key takeaway or that key message that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I think for us to be open to opportunity. I guess we knew what we wanted to create. We didn't know how we were going to create it. And I guess we've just said yes to lots of opportunities. And we've said that yes with other people. And for us, that's allowed us to grow something that's quite significant. And I guess for me, that was part of my solution is there was lots of people that told me, don't go into business with someone else. However, we had this core belief that doing things together, you'd go further. And I guess that I feel like now, if I look back on time, that's been the story of our journey. Let's do things together. Let's bring combined skills and let's go faster. And I guess for anyone in agriculture, I think that is a real challenge based on history, is lots of people haven't done that. And I think the question is how much faster can you go if you do it together with someone else, if you've got a similar vision, a similar attitude, and a similar dream.
Perfect, mate. Hey, it was great to meet you back in 2010, sorry, 13 years ago. And, you know, when I reflect back then on our time together, it just does not surprise me in the slightest that you've achieved what you've achieved, that you lead from the place that you lead from, and that you've enrolled and assembled such a significant team and business over that time. Of all of my clients over those years, you know, there's a short list of those that are just incredibly impressive, and you're certainly one of them. Steve, thanks so much for your time, mate. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeremy.
And there you have it, ladies and gents, an hour with Steven Mirtschin. Quite a private and humble character. But as I said right at the start, I love sharing stories that we might not otherwise hear. Often we interview and learn from celebrities, but I think equally there's just so much we can learn from impressive leaders like Steve. For me, his level of commitment to a picture in the future that he created, a business, like nailing and refining his business model, persisting through just multitudes of obstacles and challenges, and then some really compelling insights on how to attract and retain talent, set expectations and standards and raise those with team, and then how to scale and build out a team that can support a significantly scaled project. The value of backing people and partnering with people, as a model around which to grow. I just think so much of that is relevant in agriculture. And, I hope in the insights shared with Steve just then that you found something incredibly insightful. Just in closing, I asked him how he makes decisions, and he stopped and thought about it. And he said that he looks at business a bit like a Rubik's Cube, and that most people just want to focus on their favourite side of the Rubik's Cube. But he loves taking time when he's looking at a decision or a problem to look at it, to look at each side of that business Rubik's Cube. And he reckons there's 4 sides that he looks at. The first one is the practical side. So he looks at a problem from a practical standpoint. Then he looks at it from an entrepreneurial standpoint. And then he looks at it from a scientific standpoint or a research-based standpoint. And then he looks at it from a capital and a capital allocation standpoint. And I thought, what an insightful note on which to finish, that when we're facing a problem, we've got to make a decision. As farmers, often we only look at it from the practical standpoint. But, to look at it from the practical, the scientific, the capital, and then the entrepreneurial standpoint, I think is a really nice perspective around which to interrogate problems, decisions, business model changes, growth opportunities, and all those things. So I hope you found that as enjoyable as I have. Thanks again, everyone, for being such committed participants and listeners and followers of this podcast. It means the world to me and to our team. And Steve, thank you, mate, as always, for sharing your insights that have underpinned your success. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Profitable Farmer podcast by Farm Owners Academy. If you're new to this show, be sure to follow us. If you've been a long-time listener, let your friends know about us or come continue the conversation in the Profitable Farmer Facebook group. All the best as you grow your business and create your freedom farm. Until next time, keep being incredible.